Okay. It's going to be harder for me to actually get them to publish it. Okay, we're recording, but unfortunately not on the cloud. Did I lose audio?
No, we
You're
can
just
hear
the
you,
only one
Jim.
talking. Should someone put the Etherpad link into a chat? Because the WebEx screen share, of course, is not a clickable link. Thanks.
There, I put it in both of them. So go to the Etherpad and sign the blue sheet, everybody, please. Nobody's speaking. We're
I
waiting
will
for
say
people
something in
to,
the audio stream so everyone knows that it is working.
we're waiting for Daniel to try to figure out how to monkey with his window so he can see. I think that WebEx should put in an option to play background music.
That's an interesting thought. Although it looks like Daniel said in the Jabber that it sounded like he was supposed to be talking, but
I guess we're
cannot
not hearing him.
Yeah.
But the music has to be the Jeopardy theme.
Well, the music has to be in the public domain. So I think that we can't get anything.
Yes, you're right because of the YouTube content ID. Everyday Astronaut has a really nice theme that he uses that he got composed and it's in the public domain. It's very cool. If you've never watched it, he's an awesome guy. So we have an Elena and Francesca Palombini. Coincidence?
Nope. That's my sister.
I was gonna say, like, did you bring?
I'm trying to get new people to IETF, Michael.
Yes, I understand that. I was gonna say, are we going into the family business?
This is probably the best time to bring new people in because you don't have to worry about finding travel budget.
Oh, I was wondering if this is how she was doing her family telechats now.
Family telechats. Those are over Zoom, I'm afraid.
So how soon are Zoom speakers going to be, are the Zoom servers going to be so overloaded it doesn't work anymore? Apparently I lost my co-chair.
I think Daniel was going to try and drop and rejoin from the WebEx to fix the audio.
The last time I did, I found I could fix the audio without actually having to drop the whole thing.
Yeah, typically you can just leave the audio and go back on the audio while still within the same WebEx session.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the browser that's been disconnected from the audio.
I don't think I've ever had that happen. Oh, but I don't
Yeah,
use the browser.
so restarting the whole
browser version.
restarting the whole browser helps. Well, it can also happen to the Java version. Basically, it probably means that your audio on Linux, it means that your audio subsystem has restarted for some reason and other pieces haven't reconnected or something like that. And they're all supposed to reconnect automatically, but that's what can happen. Or sometimes you just have to restart everything, which for some people just means they reboot. But
yeah,
it only happens to me like after my desktop has been, up for 200 some days, then sometimes it gets weird like that.
Yeah,
it's because libraries get restarted, right? So you update in place, the subsystem restarts because it got an update, and then not everyone reconnects.
I don't know why they can't just unit test that. I mean, it's only, a 300-day unit test. You should be able to do that before you ship.
Yeah, and you can imagine why the people have these, have these weird bugs. Like, did you see this one of the 747, 737? Needs to have its system shut down every 37 days or something.
No, I didn't see that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's typical that they reboot the whole plane every flight, but apparently that doesn't always happen anymore for some reason.
Well, they're getting to be, I mean, some of these flights are getting to be so fast that you just don't have time to.
That may be it. Their turnaround is so good they just don't want to bother. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can't spend the hour to actually get the plane fully rebooted and checked out.
Well, I hope it doesn't take an hour, but gosh, okay. I have heard that Delta is now boarding people from back to front. So
I thought I saw a study that actually said that the way you should board people is window to aisle.
Mhm.
It was like every other row.
Yeah, but it's and that's the right way if people don't have suitcases that they want to put in the overhead. And it's the overhead, it's the stopping to put crap in the overhead that causes people to bang up the plane. And so so it turns out you want if overhead, someone did a simulation and they said the best way is actually you want to board people from back to front, but you want to board every third or fifth person in a sequence so that when they all stop, they're all stopping at the same time to put their bag in the overhead and then sitting down. Daniel, you are muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. So, well, we start from the beginning, or did you?
Nope, I haven't started the meeting yet.
Okay. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. So this is the IETF ACE meeting, or IETF 107. Here is the note well. I'm sure it's not the first time you're reading those, and you're well aware of those. So Jim is doing the Etherpad editor. For the queue management, we have this minus Q plus Q. So we usually use the WebEx chat and you write a plus Q if you want to be in the line, and you write a minus Q if you want to retrieve yourself from the line. But given the number of participants for that meeting, we may consider, discussion as a regular conversation. So don't refrain necessarily commenting. So I think we've done for the administrivia. I'm opening the floor for any document that are, I'm not saying stuck, but in being reviewed, being sent to the ISG. So does anyone want to say a word on those?
I can say something about the OSCOR profile.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we talked about this during an interim. We solved almost, since Ben is here, let's make the point. So we answered almost all of his review comments. There was one point left that Jim volunteered to do, to propose some text, and there has been no progress there. So we are version 10, and normally version 11 would be all Ben's comments addressed. So I'm just waiting for that proposal text, or if I should try to write something myself. Just let me know, Jim.
And that's the proposed text to sort of justify the 64-bit nonce from each side.
Yes, exactly. The recommendation about length of nonces.
Right.
I forgot that I was supposed to do that.
Great that I reminded you. That's the status update on that one.
And I guess the DTLS profile was even explicitly listed on the agenda. The data tracker status has it listed as revised ID needed.
Right.
I do not.
So you should have gotten a piece of email from the authors yesterday.
Okay, I have been pretty slammed, and am not fully caught up on email.
And they have
I see.
a GitHub document that they think deals with your issues.
Okay, yes, I see that now. I will take a look at that as soon as I can.
I think Olaf made some slides also for this meeting, if you want to discuss it now.
I have
Um,
been talking to Jim, and we decided that we don't really have things to discuss here, so I refrained from presenting slides. The status basically is that I tried to answer, or we have also tried to answer all the questions that Ben had and put them into the editor's copy before sending a new internet draft.
Yeah, makes sense.
So basically, you're waiting for Ben to acknowledge the comments have been addressed.
Yes. Yep.
Yes, either to acknowledge or give advice how to change them.
Any other points? I think anyone knows what to do next now?
I know what to do next. I think that's the.
I'm saying anyone. So I mean the situation is kind of clear, and everything is aligned, or is there anything that needs to be clarified?
Nothing so far. Yeah. Just
Okay. So I think it's good. So this point has been addressed. So now let's go on the document. So we'll start with the MQTT presentation. Is that fine for you, Signen?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I noticed that I left my former email there. It should have been updated to Bruno. This is a quick update of the MQTT TLS profile, which is at version 4, and I'm preparing for a version 5. Next slide, please. So version 4 addressed many of the issues that have been raised in the previous review rounds. There is a GitHub issue list there. I highlighted 2, which basically added more text than the others. The others were quickly addressable and based on the interim decisions. So I clarified the format of the AIS creation hints in the CONAC. This is supporting the AIS discovery for the MQTT version 5 clients, and also clarified the format of the auth data so that it's parsable. And there were several other improvements and clarifications based on Jim's, Daniel's, and Hannes's comments. In the past auth interim, it was also clarified that this document does not rely on the auth pop key distribution, which was actually stopped working on. And Hannes, looking at the parameters draft and the core ACE draft, he concluded we can do pretty much everything defined in his previous draft for the HTTP and JSON case. So these are the main highlights that happened since the last interim. Next slide. I wanted to bring to your attention and kind of get a comment on some of the issues that still are remaining. One of the things that we do is we have a substantial section on how the client authenticates and authorizes to the resource server. And due to two layers, TLS and MQTT, we've kind of have a table that clarifies what is acceptable. And for this document, we've recommended the option of TLS Anonymous and ACE with the token authentication authorization. And Jim was asking whether this recommended option is acceptable to everyone. So this is one thing that I would like to bring to the discussion. The other thing is that we do not, like the core document, we don't accept multiple tokens. And when, in the fourth case, when a token is might be provided for the TLS handshake, as well as a token in the connect message, in the MQTT case, we overwrite the previous token and accept the latest token. And Daniel was asking whether we should really prescribe that method, or would there be any other way to do this? So these are the two questions remaining for the for that table. Next slide. Looking at the MQTT version 5 authentication using the ACE MQTT level layer and using ACE authentication, we've kind of, I just wanted to highlight that we've kind of followed the decision that was taken in the interim. And for the case of where the connect message carries the token, we do use channel binding, and we clarified the size of the label as well as the label name, TLS exporter label name. And then for the challenge-based authentication, we basically went with the 8-byte nonces provided by either side. And I understand there has been a discussion about it for the OSCO profile, and probably all that will apply to this one as well. One of the questions that Jim raised, this does not use channel binding, should it? And we were, I remember discussing that, given that the value that you get from the TLS exporter is going to be the same. Do you still want to use this in this case when the re-authentication is possible? And I think this is one thing that we would like to clarify, whether we use channel binding in the challenge response case as well. So that's the third question that I would like to bring to the work group discussion. And then the final slide. So there's a GitHub issue about how well we support MQTT version 3.1 clients, especially with version 5 servers. And we basically decided in the GitHub issue, and this is one of the things that I would like to add to the new version of the draft, is that the pure version 5 servers support pure version 5 clients, version 3.1 servers support version 3.1 clients, and v5 server support for v3.1 clients is only for the first part where it accepts username password based overloading to transport the token. However, for additional support for the enhanced error messages, this is not going to be fully supported. The other issue that Jim was raising about the clean session requirement, we basically required that at every connection, we start a clean session to avoid that the server doesn't keep state unnecessarily. And Jim was asking whether this is too strong because of the quality issues that we should be taking into account. And one option would be to reduce that to should, and then give shoulds and musts on broker behavior about how they should treat the session state case. And that would include, for instance, binding the token into the session state that is kept by the server, have a maximum expiry set by the broker instead of the client, because in MQTT, client dictates how long is the session expiry is and how long the state must be kept at the resource server or the broker. So there should be a policy regarding capping that and etc. So there are a few things that needs to be added if we drop down to should. And then the final comment about Hannes was, should we use broker in the terminology or say MQTT server? I also would like to hear work group opinion on that. And these are all the discussion points I have regarding this draft. And if we can get an answer to this, it would help me to prepare the version 5.
So let's go back maybe to the first question.
Mm-hmm.
Here we had 2 questions, I think.
Yes, one question was that recommended option, is it acceptable to the work group?
So basically the recommendation is that to do the authentication
Why the
by
token?
MQTT
Yeah, passing
and
the
not,
token in Connect.
yeah, as opposed to TLS.
Yes, that was the case. But I've discussed with Jim that actually any of the options I'm ready to follow. It's just that it was good to present a recommended option, that there is a recommended option clarified. Though I don't feel too strongly for either case. I thought for the clients that do not want to do the alt-set info, that they need to pass the token before, the unknown ace option would be kind of a good recommendation.
I mean, is there anyone opposed to that, or that thinks it's not the way we should do that? Are there any advantage to do authentication at the MQTT layer rather than TLS?
The only advantage I can think about is that for the RPK case, it would be different that for the PSK because the token can be in PSK identity. For the RPK case, you would have to use the insecure alt-set info or public alt-set info topic to pass the token beforehand.
Yeah, I think you get a uniformity of workflow, message flow to do it this way, and also perhaps a slight privacy benefit in that the TLS channel is protecting all of the authorization information being exchanged.
So I'm hearing as having application layer authentication, I mean, above TLS as a good option.
It's the option I would prefer.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm hearing that no one is saying it's not the one we should not recommend, and given that we do not prevent the other ways. So I hope Signum is that. I mean,
keep
does
the
it
same.
address?
Sorry, I got cut out a bit before. So I keep the same. That's fine.
I think that's a consensus here.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
hearing. And what I was saying is that in any case, I mean, you're not preventing the other to happen. So, I mean, I think it's decent.
Okay. The second question I had here was about if we are in the over-authenticated case where a token has been provided and checked and validated, and then another token has been provided by the connect message of the MQTT. If these two tokens are different, of course, the validation has been done for both of them. We keep the last one. We don't do merging of permissions of what the different tokens say and etc. Is this an acceptable way of going?
I, 'Cause, 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 So basically, you would have a token for. I mean, is that two different tokens being handled by MQTT?
Well, there could be that we wouldn't be able to stop that from happening. That's why I'm saying this is an over-authenticated case where the tokens might be the same or different. In any case, they would be validated. However, we overwrote the one that is provided, we take the one that is provided in the connect as the final and do not try to see whether, did we parse a token for this client, what permissions it already had, shall we merge them together? We don't do that.
I think the group has basically generally said, do not try to merge tokens. It's too hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I think merging is definitely hard. And to me, the most important thing is to have it very clear about what the behavior should be. And having it overwrite is a fine behavior for that to be.
Okay.
Signe, just one question, Göran Selander. So is there any problem with order here that you might get? I mean, it might be that you get the connect token, which is actually an earlier token overwriting a later token.
I think if the client ends up having two tokens and uses the older one, it might lead to not being able to authorize a client that was authorized in the TLS layer. If you're asking that, yes. But then the client will be given that authorization error and will figure out that it has done something wrong.
Okay.
If the two tokens, one is earlier and none of them have expired, but the older token has a reduced set of permission sets, and the client might end up being operating in a reduced set of permissions. And then again, it will discover that by trying to publish to or subscribe to some topics and being rejected, and discover it again as an authorization error, and we'll have to figure out something about it again.
Okay. Yes, and I'm maybe that's something. I mean, this relates to something we discussed before about order of whether you need to be able to understand what is the earliest, what is the latest token. I just wondered if from this particular procedure, that how do you acquire the tokens? Could it be that you acquire the token that you will use to connect before you acquire that used with TLS, or is that at least that in the right order?
Goran, Goran, are you referring to the client acquiring the token or the server acquiring the token?
I suppose both tokens come from the client, or am I misunderstanding something here?
Well, the server will always get the TLS token before it gets the MQTT token.
Yes.
So that's a fixed order.
Correct, but if the client gets the token in the reverse order, it would first post the latest token with the TLS handshake, and then the earlier token with the connect.
It shouldn't. So we just say in the document that it shouldn't do that. It shouldn't try to do the last version, that last option. It is there for completeness, but we do not actually recommend that option to be selected. It's kind of over authenticating. It's, in the case of the same token, it's like you're pushing the token in two different layers. In terms of different tokens, that's the part where I wanted to be more careful. And that's why I said, whatever you do, I'll accept the token, the last I hear, which is the resource server will get the token at the connect MQTT later than, of course, the TLS handshake. So it will just stick to what it knows latest from the client. So that's what I thought. And if client misused its tokens or did a behavior that kind of reduced its set of actions, then it will be reminded of that by authorization errors.
Right. So I guess the answer to Göran's question is basically that it's a programming or a logic error in the client to even attempt to do that. So we shouldn't worry too much about the negative consequences if the client does something silly.
Hmm.
Okay, thanks.
So, do you have enough?
Yes, I do.
Is
Yeah.
that? I mean, enough feedback to address the
Yeah.
two concerns?
Yeah, I'll keep the text as it is. I just wanted to make sure that comments raised around them were addressed in the meeting and with a consensus.
Yeah. Just one little thing. Do we always have? Do we always use the exporter from TLS or to bind the? I mean, when we do the MQTT authentication, to
That's
bind
the
that
next,
to the TLS.
that's the next slide. That's one of the things that I wanted to discuss as well.
Okay.
So I heard so the first thing that I wanted to discuss is that for the case where we have the token in the connect and then we do TLS exporter and get the content or the secret to do the pop over it. And we decided on the size of the exporter and we decided on the label of the exporter. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that that's been updated in the last interim. However, what I wanted to say is that when you want to re-authenticate in this version, I assume I understand this correctly, that the value you get from the TLS exporter with the same label will be the same. So we shouldn't do re-authentications enabled in the first part, where the connect carries the token.
Is the concern that the re-authentication will not give you any new information because
yeah,
the stale signature or stale MAC could be just reused?
Yes, that's what I was. So doing the pop would make no sense because it will be the same value derived from the TLS exporter. That's how I understand.
Yes.
So I thought I should be clear that re-authentication should not be supported if client connects with token in the connect message this way by already having computed a pop. Whereas in the second version, we have a challenge response scheme where the broker provides a challenge, client adds its own nonce, and then what Jim was suggesting, we can still do channel binding and add the TLS exporter to here as well. But then in the re-authentication, at least the RS nonce and the client nonce would be different, even though we get the same TLS exporter value. And then the question is there any value of adding the TLS exporter here, doing channel binding here?
I think it makes the analysis easier to reason about if we include the TLS exporter value. It's not in the
challenge
second
response.
Yeah, in the
Sorry,
challenge
in the
response.
challenge response case. Okay.
Yes. It's not really clear to me that it actually gives you a security benefit, but it's much easier to reason about, and if there's not very much extra cost to doing so,
Okay.
it seems reasonable to also include the TLS exporter.
Okay. So so what I hear is that for the first description, we shouldn't allow re-authentications. For the second one, we do allow re-authentications as the RS nonce and client nonce will change, but we will add the channel binding as well.
Sounds right to me.
And to me as well. Thanks.
It's I'm fine with that, but what isn't clear to me is why not having the exporter could still. How do we do the binding without the exporter?
We don't. We didn't.
Okay.
We said we wouldn't. Yeah, yeah. There wouldn't be any. And then we were asking whether we are okay with that or not. And Jim was saying it would be still good to do a challenge in the pop over the triplets rather than two.
Okay, but then my question to Ben is why? What did you have in mind when you say you're not sure? It adds some security.
Well, so if both sides are contributing a nonce and both nonces are input to the signature or the MAC, and the verification checks that the nonces match, then that gives you pretty strong agreement
Okay,
that
okay.
the two parties are well, that both sides think that the communicating parties are the same communicating parties. But
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
I
also
see.
add in the exporter, that sort of gets you maybe a slightly stronger statement about the communications channel that they're using also being the same. If you do not use the exporter, there might be some sort of I guess proxy in the way.
Okay,
And
the nonce
sizes-
here are the
Oh.
TLS nonce or?
No, it's client. The nonces referred to here is that basically random numbers that are generated by either side.
But MQTT ones, or no?
Yeah.
Okay,
The
MQTT.
client side or the broker side, yes. The application side, they kind of create this in addition to now we add the channel binding.
Okay.
And are we fine with the sizes? The 8 bytes is fine, especially when we add the exporter value, even though the exporter value wouldn't be changing around re-authentications.
I think we should proceed as on the assumption that the 8 bytes are fine.
Okay.
In light of what Jim has agreed to provide for the DTLS document.
Okay.
Okay. So I also like it better when we have the exporter. Then just one last comment on the previous authentication is that's not the same. I mean, are they available for V3 and V5?
V311 we need to do only the first one. V5 can do both.
Okay.
V311 cannot do the challenge response
Okay.
because
Yeah,
they
yeah.
don't have the messaging format.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, this was referring to how interoperable we are in terms of supporting older clients that use V311. And at the moment, what we describe is that V5 servers can also implement the authentication method supported or that can be used by V311, which is basically overloading the username password fields to pass the token to the resource server or the broker. They could support this, but then V5 does more in terms of returning error messages that do not exist in V311. And Jim was rightfully pointing out that some of the clients might be just dropping those messages or just parsing as much as they understand and then not bothering about the rest. Or silently, these things might be read and not communicated to the client. And these are important issues because the behavior would be that, for instance, for a publication acknowledgement, the server would send a PubAC, but it would have an authorization error. The V311 client can understand this as a PubAC, publication acknowledgement, not realizing that its message is not relayed to the clients that are subscribing to that topic. So it will be like a silent drop of a message at the broker side. And we kind of think that the language around how much interoperability is supported should be strengthened. So that's, if I interpreted our discussion correctly, Jim.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think we should basically say don't do that. If you're a V3.1 client, you really need to rewrite to V5. But I think we should acknowledge that it could happen and the V3.1 client's going to be lost.
Mhm. Again, the security is not in the sense that if you're not authorized, your messages are not relayed. It's just that the clients will have a confusing period thinking that their messages are going through when they're not, for instance, if they are not supporting the enhanced error messages. So that's why we were clarifying very clearly, tell us you're a version 3.1 client. In that case, we can, the version 3.1 servers would disconnect these clients directly, abruptly, basically, if an authorization error happens. If the V5 server knows that it's dealing with a v3.1 client, it might also choose that method. It might choose not to send enhanced error messages, but dropping those clients. That's another way to deal with them.
I think if we're going, go ahead.
I think I'm starting to come down on the side of V5 clients should not support the password username overload, just to stop things sooner.
Okay. Yes, okay. And then the risk broker side could be dual stack. They would deal with V5, V3.1 clients separately.
Yes, and that's included in the initial connect message, which version you want to talk.
Yeah.
Right, and so that would definitely mean that the dual stack server would provide the 3.1 compatible or the 3.1 behavior to the 3.1 clients.
Indeed. If we are, I'm happy with this. And if there are no other comments, I can conclude with the clean session requirement. Whether this is a too strict requirement or not was my question.
So, I mean, I think that having the clean session requirement makes it easier for us to write a complete and accurate specification.
Indeed.
And it possibly makes the implementation simpler. So it was not clear to me what the benefits were of allowing the server to keep state. Does that provide some efficiency gains in some cases?
Yes, it provides you efficiency gains. If a client is trying to get a quality of service that says things are guaranteed to be delivered, it can disconnect, reconnect an hour later, and find out if its messages were really delivered. It doesn't have to keep the session up the entire time.
I don't think that I'm going to be able to come up with an answer I'm happy with on the call. So if anyone else has thought about this some more, they should please jump in.
At the moment, all we do is we accept the trade-off. But if there is a better way to, so my alternative suggestion would be say should, but then give a bit more direction to the implementation, providers, saying that they should have token information also stored at the session state, being able to bind information from the client from the previous session, and do not accept the max expiry, session expiry from the client if it's too high, because that could be misused. Clients with no intention of returning might end up making the server keep state for a very long time.
Right. Do we have a way where we could have this document keep the strong, the must statement but leave the possibility of some future extension that would allow the other behavior, possibly negotiated in the protocol or possibly just by pre-configured agreement.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just thinking how MQTT is approaching this, and in the specification, the MQTT specification, they basically suggest the policy suggestions. Basically, they make policy suggestions as I suggested in the bullet B, and it doesn't seem like they were going towards a negotiation phase in the MQTT Connect message regarding. They were basically saying if the client is asking too long expiries and you're not able to support this due to whatever, you have an admin policy. I'm not too sure there will be a protocol answer to this.
Okay, yeah, so there's not likely to be a negotiation in the protocol for it.
But one of the things is the sessions, the token itself sets a limit on how long the session can stay alive.
That's true. It's assuming that there are no very long-lived tokens that live beyond the session time. I was expecting that the tokens might, there might be a very long-lived token where client connects and then submits the same token, but then has to do proof of possession over different nonces and etc. I was thinking that the tokens may outlive the sessions.
Well, if I'm reading correctly, as long as it's a policy-driven thing in MQTT, I think even we enforce the policy or we leave it to the clients with some maybe interoperability issues. So should or may apply here.
I mean, we are not making things worse than what the base MQTT spec says.
Yeah,
That's correct.
but, it's hard to make it better. That's it's what I wanted to say.
My preference would be to drop it to a should.
Okay. I'm also feeling warmer towards should as well. I thinking must may be too strong for clients that have efficiency concerns.
Anyone has a strong feeling for a must? So I think should could be considered.
Okay. My final comment is regarding terminology. I kept using the word broker because that's the most understood word for MQTT server in practice. But I'm open to switching to MQTT server if people don't like broker.
Francesca here. I do agree with broker rather than switching to server. I think that's clear, and with the work on the PubSub, it to me makes more sense to keep broker.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I don't remember now if you have some in the terminology about.
Yes,
this.
I do. Yeah, we can define broker. It's just that Hannes was pointing out that the specification of MQTT says it's MQTT server and doesn't use the broker. But in practice, people understand broker as the MQTT server. So.
And if there is something in the terminology section, then it's
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we have everything ready for the next version.
Yes, we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So suggest we go to the next presentation.
Yes. Before we do, actually, I wanted to ask a question to chairs and AD about what's happening with the framework document, because we didn't talk about it in the beginning of meeting.
The instructions that I gave the AD at one point was I would like to see all 4 documents progress at the same point in time, because it may be difficult for the IESG to understand the framework document by itself without
Okay, so they're waiting on the profiles, basically.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I can start presenting this. Key provisioning for group communication using ACE. Next slide, please. This is just a slide of recap. I'm not gonna. So I don't know how we are on time, but I'm gonna try to be quick. Next slide. What's left to do? So today I'm gonna give a very brief, high-level status update of the document and more detail about where to find the detailed updates. And what's left to do from February's interim. Also, I will describe some updates that need OK from the working group, which are already implemented in the current editor version of the document. And also we'll talk about the open GitHub issues, which are including open points from the latest review that we got. And hopefully, if we can agree on all of these open points today, we can submit the version 06 very soon. And then what I don't think we will have time to discuss today are some other open points from mailing list posts. These are the subjects, so you can go and see. Some of these are quite old, but we haven't forgotten about them. We just haven't had the time to discuss yet. And there's some couple of open points to check from a previous review which might be outdated, but we never really checked. So this will be included in the version 7. Next slide. So yes, the to-do left from the February interim. So this was the to-do slides from that meeting. 2 out of 3 are done. So this was a token to cover more than one group or topic at once, and including Jim's review. Those are done. And then there is a Peter's review that was mostly editorials and clarification, which is started, but is not yet finished. Next slide. So since IETF 106, there was 2 versions that were submitted, one on January 15th that closed most points from IETF 106. Then we got a review from Jim. Thank you very much for that. And we presented and discussed that during the 2 interims in January and February. And then before the submission cutoff, we submitted version 5, and that was based on the previous review. And we already got another review from Jim, which we translated into GitHub issues. So now we have been working on these GitHub issues. So the work in progress is in this pull request version 06 on GitHub, which you can see linked here. And most issues are closed, but there are some open points left. Next. So I also went ahead and started labeling issues to try to keep track better of what needs to be done and what is done. So I labeled in green editor done and working group review request to mean that I think I have addressed the comment, or we have addressed the comments, and please shout or comment or do something to say that no, this does not address your comment. And if we don't see anything happening after some days, we will close it. Ongoing means I'm working on it at that very time. So I'm planning on getting the editor done label soon. Then question if I need more information or I don't understand this issue. PR was just to label the issues that I was going to include or are included in this PR. So right now the status is 33 open issues. 51 were closed from before. There is actually, of these 33, 27 are editor done. So I think that they should be closed, but let's see if there is anything that you don't think so. There are 3 open and 3 question. Next slide, please. So we also got some okay, so this is the update that is already included, but that we wanted to discuss because we think it deserves discussion. So this is the from the scope question from Jim, or how we are dealing with multi-scope tokens. So the goal was to have one access token cover multiple groups at once. So there is only one token post for several groups. The access token response will include this sign info parameter, which is an array of sign info. So this sign info entry includes information about what signing algorithm and parameters are to be used in that group. So before we had just when we had just one token per group, then we had only one of these sign info parameter. Now we have an array of them. And also for the scope, we have an array of scopes, what we had before for scope. So there was a group identifier and roles. So a node can join several groups if they use the same public key encoding and signing algorithm. And that would be done with one token post followed by several joining exchanges. So if you just go quickly to the next slide, we'll have to go back, but so this is what would happen. A client would send this token post to the KDC for 2 groups, and he would get one response with the token, and then he would use this token twice at the same KDC to join 2 different groups. If you can go back one slide. So there is something that is more worrying, is that the same, so we have these KDC nonce that is used as an input, one of the input, there is also a client nonce, to the signature for the client to prove possession of its private key. And if we do it this way, then the same KDC nonce is used to join each different group. Also, I wanted to note that the ASCII Group Commons Core does it differently. So the KDC nonce in that case is used only once, and then it based the next nonces on the existing security association between the client and the KDC. So if you go to the next slide, so you can see basically I tried to show that KDC nonce is only one that is sent in the token response, and then the signature of the joining response is covers, or the input to that signature is the KDC nonce and the client nonce. So opinions on that?
Just to make sure I'm clear on this, if the client used the same nonce in both joining requests, signature 1 would be the same as signature 2?
No, because yes, sorry. If the client uses the same client nonce, yes.
So the joining and request lines have different group IDs on them, but we're saying that that is not input to the signature. Because the signature is on the response.
That is not right now. That's correct. It could be, but I mean the signatures. So we say that the client. So this signature is computed over this KDC nonce and also a client nonce. So the client must generate different nonce for its joining. So the signature will be different as a consequence. But the problem is that we are still generating this KDC nonce and then we're using it several times as one of the inputs of the signature.
Right. I mean, I think that's less worrisome to me. The reusing the KDC nods is less worrisome to me if we also include in the signature some of the attributes of the operation that we're performing.
Yeah,
such as
we can do that. No problem. Otherwise, if this doesn't create big red flags, we could keep it in, and then, as I said, the application profiles might define. Sorry. Might define another way to do this.
And the question I have is, why do you do it differently in OS Core?
Marco here. I have a slide in the next presentation. I interpreted that nonce literally as to be used just once in the join request immediately following the token post. Because in any other following case and joining, we describe alternative ways to compute the signature challenge.
I mean, that's a valid point. If we should align, if we even need to do that. But maybe let's take that discussion during the next presentation.
Okay.
If that's fine. So what I hear is we keep it as it is, and we include also the group identifier in the signature computation. Then, of course, if
I think somehow we need some. I mean, some kind of randomness also. I think.
nonces are
Okay.
Yeah, both the KDC nonce is
No, the other one.
by the KDC
You have for sure the client nonce
and
that
the
is always
client
fresh.
nonce.
Okay. That is different in the two groups.
Yes.
Even if you rejoin a same group, it's a new join request, you can produce a new one. So you have always some freshness around.
Okay.
But if there is no more comments, I think, of course, we can continue this discussion by mail if people need to think a bit more about this. I think we can move to next. So this was Jim's proposal on legal request store. So that was the subject of the mail. So the goal was that the role is to be propagated along with the signature public key for each node from the KDC to the server during the joining process. And this was just so that a client joining the group can get the information of what each node public key is supposed to have as role. So in this case, what we did to solve this was to add this peer roles parameter. So before we have pub keys parameter, so this is all sent from the KDC to the joining node. And before, the joining node was getting only the keys, and now we have added this parameter where it also gets a list of roles. So in this case, you would know that the node that is that has key 1 has a role requester, key 2 has role requester, and key 3 has role requester and responder. That this is an example, but this is what is implemented now in the document. Jim, are you happy with that? Do you see any problem with this?
Yeah, no, I reviewed it, and I think what it's doing is fine in the document.
Okay, great. So that was just to check. Next.
So I'm gonna try page down.
Let's see. Yes. Okay. So this one is a big one. This is an open issue from the GitHub. So we move now to the open issues part of the presentation. And this, I have some questions. So this was from Jim. The issue is when are the public key and proof of possession required to be present? And Jim's text is in blue here. And Jim wanted to, I think he wanted to add some text about like explicitly stating when public key and proof of possession are supposed to be present in the different requests. But I am a bit confused about what does this consideration applies to? Does it apply to the join process or to the post public key? So when a node posts a new public key to the KDC, and if this applies to everything, I am not sure that this adds a lot because the joining and the public key processes are quite orthogonal. And I mean, I think that these considerations are correct, but I am not sure that this adds a lot in terms of it helps with clarifying or it covers things that are not already covered in the document. But I could be wrong. So I also saw that you commented on the issue, but I didn't understand that response, Jim. So if you could comment on this.
Okay, so what I was thinking was that you could associate the public key with the token as opposed to associating the public key with the join. And that means that the first join on a single token, you would have to present the public key and do the proof of possession. On the second join with the same token, one could presume that the same public key was being used and you would therefore not have to do the pop on it. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I thought, okay, so for the first part, I think this should be already covered. As I say, after the point one, basically that key and proof possession are required during joint process if the KDC collects and distributes keys and the client is a sender. So there is a bit more, what do you say, requirements on when you have to, when you must send, but we do say that it must be sent. And for the next join, I think that we might need to add, that you're right, we might need to add more consideration about the key might be omitted or the proof of possession might be omitted, etc. Would that, is that what you were aiming for?
Yes, that's the sort of thing I was aiming for.
Okay, okay. So then I understand what needs to be done and I will give it a shot. So let me just note that. Okay. And when you say next join, that would be when you say next join, that would be so the node has joined a group, has left the group, and is rejoining now.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
that would be one. The second would be I join group one and then I join group two.
Okay. Okay. So it also covers joining two different groups at the same KDC.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you. So next one. Issue 83, section. So this section was the post to public key, group rekeying if a public key is replaced. And your comment, Jim, was if a public key is replaced, does this constitute a reason that a key rollover is going to be required? And the answer, I wrote, the answer is not necessarily, but nothing stops the KDC to do a key rollover if it wants. I think this should already be clear. And if not, can you help me out? What is missing?
If I'm a client and I say I'm switching from public key 1 to public key 2. Should my client, and I tell the KDC that, should my client now be able to send a group message signed with public key 1?
Yes. Sorry, public key 2.
No, 1.
Yes.
Public key
1.
1.
No.
How do you enforce that with
Okay.
the key rollover?
Okay. I see what you're saying. And now I understand what you meant by key rollover. I was thinking symmetric key rollover for some reason, but you're talking about the public key. Okay.
Just one clarification. So, do you mandate to have one public key, or at some point, I mean, for the key rollover, you will probably have 2 keys, and you may for some time sign with the 2 keys.
No, we mandate 1 public key right now. That's what we say in the document.
But we cannot have 2.
The new key would override the first one. The problem is telling the other group members.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm not very familiar with the current version, but if you're doing a key rollover, I mean, all the nodes don't have immediately the new ones. So if they are signing things, it might be that you have a mix between nodes having both keys, nodes having only the old one, and yeah, maybe you don't have nodes only having the new one. But if you want to introduce the new one, you may have to sign with both key for some time.
Yeah, this is not something that we really thought about. I mean, we thought about when the client would sign with public key 2, and then the other nodes would get the message and realize, okay, I need to fetch the new, or yeah, it would sign with with key 2, and then the other nodes would have to fetch the public key 2. I'm wondering if this is like, why would a client update its own public key and then use the first key?
If the key got compromised.
Assume
The
all
second one.
clients are evil.
So if the other recipients see the message signed in key 2 and have to go fetch it, then the other clients could know that once they fetch key 2, they should disregard key 1. But we don't necessarily have reliable delivery for all messages to the group, to all recipients. So that if we said once the client sends a new key, it also has to send a message signed in that key along with it as the signal to everybody to sort of refresh the key.
Yeah. That is something we could add, but I don't think that solves the scenario that Jim was describing.
I agree. I don't
yeah, that's a good point. I don't really know what we want to do. Yeah. Now I understand the problem, so thank you for that. Do you have proposal, Jim, or?
Well, if you force a key rollover.
That would be your proposal.
That would be my proposal.
Okay.
Jim, do you mean of the overall symmetric key material too?
No.
Yes.
He's talking about the.
No,
also
I mean
symmetric.
key. No, I mean do a symmetric key rollover. So you basically move the epoch forward one.
That's the only way I can see to make sure that all of the group members take the update.
Okay.
How does that prevent the client to still use the first signature key?
Because it is, if you go look and find the public key, at that point, it's not going to work. There's all sorts of possible refreshes of public keys that need to happen on a key rollover.
All right.
Okay, I think we'll give it a shot and we'll get back.
Just another comment. If changing a key generates a key rollover, do we have some scalability issues if you have a billion nodes and I'm deciding to update my key every second? Are we gonna burn the modes or?
I'm going to throw you out of the group.
I think the KDC would be rejecting malicious behavior like that.
Okay, but we'll try to formulate something for this, and yes, please watch the GitHub issues for. We're having, I think, to keep the discussion focused on this. We'll have them in the GitHub. So next slide. Also, I was just checking the Jabber, and I have not been looking at it. So if there is anything that is worth bringing up to the microphone, please do. Issue with issue number 88. Extend the first paragraph. So Jim, again, these need to be explained a bit more. I copy pasted the first paragraph. It's just that one sentence there. When a client receives a message from a sender for the first time, it needs to have a mechanism in place to avoid replay. For example, Appendix B2 of OSCORE. And you're saying this needs to be explained a bit more. So the question we have is this what you'd like to see in this more? Mechanism like Appendix B2 is useful in case of lost context and reboot, so that the recipient can be on the safe side. And and if the group is rekeying, the time window between the end of the rekeying and the next loss of context is safe to go. Is this does this cover what you wanted?
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay, so then we will write this down. That's good. Thank you. Next slide. Issue 77 is one of the open ones. And Jim wanted to have the possibility to do a fetch of public keys based on node roles. This is not yet implemented, but I was thinking of doing it this way. So right now we have, we say that a node in the part who is part of the group can do fetch to this resource pub key with the payload, the CBOR array with the identifiers of the nodes. I hear some noise. Daniel, could you mute, please? Thank you. And the proposal is to switch to a different payload where it's an array with two elements. The first one is the array of roles as sorry, the first one is an array of roles, and the second one is the array of node identifiers, which would be the same as before. And that would mean that the node wants all keys for the nodes having roles. In this case, role 1, sorry for the typo, role 1 or role 2, and for the nodes, node 1, node 2, and node 3. And to just highlight that having an empty array, oh, I lost the slides. Having an empty array is okay for the roles, and also that you can use combination of roles is also okay. So having an array with role 1, role 2, that means that I want all keys for the nodes having roles role 1 and role 2.
So when you say an empty array is okay, you don't mean an empty array represents having not wanting anything, but it means wanting everything.
No. In this case, it means not wanting anything. So if the array is empty, it means that he's looking for nodes having role, no role defined. So it's not going to ask depending on roles. That's what it means.
Oh, yeah, I see where I misunderstood you. I thought you were making a cross product of roles and nodes, but it's just two different domains. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Also, like this combination of roles. So this is because the OS core profile, for example, specifies combination of roles. So if a node is requester and responder, you can indicate this by saying this is an array with requester in a string, comma, responder in the next string. And this is one role. But if a different profile, say MQTT or something else, wants to define the combined role as without using CBOR as one element with like one string with a plus in the middle or something like that, that's also fine. So it doesn't have to use this array of roles for the combination. So this is my proposal, and if there is no objection, I will go ahead and implement this. Sounds good, Jim?
It seems complicated, but I didn't actually bother thinking about how to solve it. I just wanted it solved. So
okay,
that looks good.
If you see a better way, comment in the issue, and I'll try to. I'll see. This was the best that I came up with. Next, please. We're getting to the easy issue. So yeah, Jim wanted to have one more parameter that that helps with this. There might want to be two different expiration values that are defined. When you stop sending using the key material, and when you stop receiving using the key material. And these values would need to be contingent on a key revocation event, and delta could be set up as a new group parameter. So Jim wants a delta parameter with the default value set by, I guess, the application profile. This is easy to add, and I still just haven't gotten to it yet. I just wanted to ask what is contingent on a key revocation event. What does that mean?
Well, if somebody revokes the keys, then you don't you can't use it for verification anymore. I'm not too sure how you would do that. I am perfectly happy if you punt this issue and say no.
I mean, I don't see a problem with this. It's going to be an optional parameter, and if a application profile wants to use it, can use it.
Right, but okay, true. This did exist in X509, and I don't know that it ever got implemented correctly by everybody. So I'm totally happy to say punt this.
Okay, so you're saying you're wanting this, but you also don't want this. No, I understand.
I'm saying it's worth thinking about, and the answer can be no.
Okay. Does anybody have an opinion if this should be added or not?
Well, my opinion would be that having something like this may make it much more palatable to actually do a key rollover. So I think it's a feature that should be in.
Yeah, we're already also talking in the document about about the fact that nodes can keep using the key material for a while. So for receiving, so I think this would make sense to add.
Yeah, I remember that we added a similar mechanism in RFC 6282, which is a completely different thing where we are sending compression contexts, and we want to make sure that an old context has time to time out, so people have time to get the new one.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be a similar situation.
Yeah. Okay, so but I'll go ahead and implement this, and if anything comes up and people are strongly against, then it's easy to revert back. Okay, thank you. Next slide. Issue 90, unmeet encoding in JSON. And this was your comment again, Jim. In terms of the name, what about doing the encoding in JSON? So are you talking about registering ACE group com plus JSON formats or content type, media type?
Yes.
And also at that point, all the ACE group parameters will have to also be defined for JSON, because now they only are defined for CBOR.
Yes. I mean, if I'm doing this with the MQTT, I want to do it in JSON, not in CBOR.
Okay. Yeah, just wanted to check, and I haven't had time to do this, but
I think there is an obvious answer to this question. We started that way in the TEEP working group, and at the last hackathon, the last physical hackathon in Berlin, we finally decided to get rid of JSON. I would hate to go into the other direction anywhere.
so you're saying you don't want to register the parameters in JSON as well?
Yes,
Or,
that's what I'm saying.
so this would not be a huge difference, because it just adds one column for the parameters to say this is the name in JSON. But what was the reason for?
Well, in TEEP, we found that essentially all the interrupt testing had to be done twice for both a JSON and a CBOR encoding. And at some point, people said, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
I think I agree with that position. It's putting in a choice makes a lot of sense if there's actually benefit from that, but I don't see the benefit.
I think in this case it could be if if this were to be used by MQTT groups, for example, that do not.
Is there something that stops an MQTT implementer from putting in a few lines for doing CBOR as well?
There is nothing that would stop that from happening. The question is, at one point we made a contract with the IESG that we would support JSON because OAuth supports JSON. And the question is, can we break that contract?
Well, that was for ACE though, and this part where we define new parameters is for the two message exchange that happen after the ACE exchange. I do agree that, I mean, to make it consistent with the first part with ACE, it will make sense to say, if you're using CBOR, keep using CBOR, and if you're using JSON, keep using JSON.
There is this contamination effect where just because some part of the system is handling material in one encoding, you suddenly have to implement it everywhere else because that stuff might be leaking over to your side. So it's really expensive to do this kind of thing. And I would prefer not to create choices where there's no need for one.
I think what we said in the OSCOR profile is this profile, for example, this is an example. This profile uses CoAP and CBOR, but this can be adapted with JSON if you prefer so.
Ben, do you want to
If
weigh
you're
in on
using
this?
that.
Ben, can you weigh in?
I don't have a particularly strong opinion yet, unfortunately. I might need to think about it some more.
Do you see a problem if we just decide to go CBOR only with the IESG?
I would be willing to send that to the IESG. No guarantees about what kind of reception it will get.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't implement this issue.
Yes.
Good. Next slide. I think we're almost done. Yes, Jim wanted to see a new role or functionality for the proxy signature checker. We have added consideration about that in the text, and what I said was that you do not need to be a member of the group, so you don't have to have done the join process to actually get the public keys from the pubkey resource. As long as you are authorized by the AS to get access to the pubkey resource, you can get the public keys and do the signature. Application profiles can still define roles for those, and I think the AS Keyboard Chroma score does. Is that okay, or do you want something more, Jim?
That's probably fine.
Okay. So next slide. So right now, except for those issues we just talked about, every other issues is marked as editor done. And is there anything you'd like to bring up if you've had a time to check them? All of them were raised by Jim, so particularly to Jim right now, but anybody, of course. I also saw that you commented on 2 issues that you said were not fixed.
Yeah, everything else is fine.
Yeah, and I gave another shot on to these 2 before the meeting, so you probably didn't see that yet. But we can continue offline in that case.
Yep.
So I just need your okay on these 2 that I just fixed. Everything else is fine. Okay, next slide. We are basically done. Yes, last slide. My plan, I think that was, yeah, the plan forward was to get okay for all of the editor done issues, include the issues above, as we said, merge the PR, submit version 06, and then after that, we will work on the rest of the points that were in the previous slide. And if we could have an interim about this, just to speed up the process, that would be great. And then submit version 07, and unless Jim comes up with another very extensive review, no, unless there are more comments, we think this should be basically done.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Great,
So,
thank you.
Next presentation. Marco.
Yeah, the footer is kind of cut, but okay, there now. Thank you. So this is a quick update on this application profile base building on ASCII.com. Next slide, please. Just a quick recap. This is about a client asking for an access token to an authorization server to be posted to an OSCORE group manager acting as resource server to get into an OSCORE group and get back the key material to communicate with group OSCORE in that group, building on whatever compatible transport security profile of ACE. What is out of scope of this document is the actual usage of group OSCORE in the group to communicate and the access control inside the group among group members. That's another document. Next slide, please. So since Singapore, we had 2 versions submitted, and each of them was discussed. The interim we had in January or in February. We got reviews and comments, especially from Jim. Thanks a lot for them. And thinking of the latest review especially, we addressed most of it in the current text we have in the editor's copy on GitHub. There are a few open points left, for which I have some slides later. Next slide, please. And to quickly summarize the biggest updates between the latest interim actually and today, following input from Bennett Singapore mostly, we had the security considerations related to the two-ounces exchange between client and server for the sake of the signature process and to build the signature challenge. So we discussed especially their size as well as implication of possible reusage in case of device reboot, and the fact that instead we don't really incur any risk of replay, because after all, they are combined for a challenge that is sent over a secure channel between the client and the group manager. Also, it's much less critical than in other situations like the OSCORE profile, because they're not really used to build any security context. So going for that size would be much safer here. And aligned with previous discussion, we are registering a TLS exporter label dedicated to this document when a TLS exporter is used to build that challenge instead, at later joinings among a client and the group manager using the TLS profile. Also aligned with ASCII.com, now we are also considering multi-group scope, all covered by the same token, possibly with different roles. And in this particular draft, we are adding integer abbreviations for the different roles, simply to save some byte on the wire. Next slide, please. Right, just as Francesca explained, essentially we are here also addressing the legal request and responder proposal of Jim. We are detailing a bit more, considering in details of this document, the provisioning of an updated public key from a current group member at the group manager. And we are also defining here a new operation at the group manager interface. We are defining it here because it's not generic enough to be defined in ASCII.com, we thought. And this essentially allows the current group members to retrieve from the group manager the current status of the group, active, inactive. And the status is set by a different kind of entity, an administrator, also described in a separate document. But nodes can be interested in retrieving the status because essentially if it's inactive, current group members are supposed to refrain from communicating in the group. Well, actually no new members can join until the group becomes active again. So this additional sub-resource is introduced and its handlers are defined. Next slide, please. Right, this is instead already present in the editor's copy on GitHub. Of course, we'll need your confirmation or feedback that everything is okay. We have tried to clarify a bit better the difference between the group name as a plain constant identifier of the group used also during the joining process, and then the actual score GID that has a totally different meaning, also cryptographically relevant. We removed that particular combination role, requester monitor, as a possible combination that a group member can have in the group, because being a requester essentially puts it in a position to be monitored just as well. We are not ruling out anymore a few things that ACE admits and then we were kind of excluding. For instance, asking for an access token considering an implicit audience scope. Now it's just possible as in ACE. And following a comment from Jim, especially in the case where a group member asks to be individually rekeyed, in particular to get a new sender ID, we are admitting the possibility for the group manager to do kind of as part of the same process, both an individual rekeying to that node as requested, plus an overall key rollover in the group. Aligned also with latest things of AceKey.com, we renamed RS nonce with KDC nonce, but just terminology, and we are also following the new structure for the sign info parameter returned after the token posting, so reflecting tokens supporting multiple groups at once. Next slide, please. And now I have a few upper points for you. The ones in this slide relates to some changes we plan in the GruppoScore document, actually, as we discussed last week. GruppoScore is introducing a new mode of operation, the pairwise mode, where messages sent one-to-one are protected with pairwise key material derived by the two particular members of the group. And this has a number of side effects for group members that are supposed to be only monitors as their only roles. So normally they're not supposed to ever send any message. So they don't even need a public key because they never need to sign anything. But in order to support that mode, when even those group members will need to have a public key, so that they need to post one to the group manager upon joining, and they also have practically to receive a sender ID used as identifier of the public key for that key's retrieval for other group members. So we plan to slightly extend with a bit more details the joining process here to say that even if presenting itself to join only as monitor, a node can anyway provide a public key to the group manager and receive a sender ID in return. So they will fully enable even that node to support and use the pairwise mode of GruppoScore. And of course, this has in turn some side effects on the text we have on uploading, retrieving, and caching public keys at the group manager. A side point on this, please, Jim.
Can you tell me why the monitor only needs a public key? Because it's never going to send messages and no one's ever going to direct a message straight to it.
You have cases where a requester sends or wants to send a one-to-one message to that monitor. And for the monitor to being able to process the message if protected with a pairwise mode, there must be a public key of that monitor involved in building that pairwise key of the pairwise mode.
I don't understand the use case. Why would you send something to a monitor only? And not basically have a different key pair for it completely, rather than using the group one.
Still, if you want to use GruppoScore as is anyway, you're thinking of having only a GruppoScore context and use GruppoScore just in pairwise mode.
In that case, it should just be a server.
Sorry, say it again.
In that case, it should. In that case, it should register itself as a responder.
Okay, sure. That's an alternative approach. Okay, we'll think of that. Thanks for the feedback. A related point on this same topic, all in all, is we think of having an additional group policy registered in this document just for the group manager to signal that the group supports the pairwise model group score, and it is used in the group. Is it okay?
I'm sorry, I got distracted. What?
We are thinking of registering a new group policy to signal that the pairwise model group score is supported in the group.
Oh, definitely have to.
Oh, okay, but that's easy. It's just this document registering it in the registry created in ASCII GroupCon. All right, thanks. Next slide, please. And should be the last one with the last open points. Yeah, that's something that Francesca started to raise in the previous presentation. It's about the KDC nonce. Was ours nonce returned by the group manager right after the token is posted? As I mentioned before, I took it literally in this context and think of these values to be used once only by the client and group manager, meaning exactly in the join request immediately following the token post to build the signature challenge as resource server share. Then any following joining request would just rely on an established secure channel, for instance, a DTLS channel. And there in the document, we are describing how different signature challenges are supposed to be derived, for instance, with a TLS exporter. So the text I sketched already in the editor scope, in fact, clarifies this. And the KDC nonce is supposed to be really single use. What do you think of this?
I tend to think that anything that's labeled nonce is single use myself. But if we're basically, but I don't like the fact that this is different than the other document.
Mm. Any preference on the way we should follow on the two?
No.
But I thought you just said that you preferred that anything called nonce is only used once. That sounds like a preference.
I'm perfectly willing to call it something other than nonce.
Okay, that's a solution. Let's call it something else and use it several times.
I mean, it's a challenge share, after all. And we just to clarify better, its lifetime.
The one case that worries me about this is if the client forgets the nonce, then you need to be able to deal with that case. But it's possible that could just be dealt with by the client reposting the token.
Yes.
That works for sure.
Yeah, but it needs some consideration, so we would have add some text about that for sure.
But what about the alternative methods that we described then, like the one based on the TLS exporter for producing a challenge? When well, relationships between client and group manager are well mature and they can rely on their secure channel.
Yeah, no, I mean, that works fine for me. I don't have any problems with that.
We don't want two methods.
I'm less happy with the OSCORE one because it is not session specific.
It involves the master secret, I think.
That's not session specific. That is, in the first case, you know that is tied to the channel. In the second case, there might be the ability to reuse it. I'm not sure.
So reusing KDC nonce solve this issue instead, right?
No. because you can still use that same KDC nonce over multiple sessions.
Right. So if the client is a good guy, you post the token again. But if it doesn't,
yeah, I'm not too sure it's solvable unless you actually do a new challenge response.
Yeah, the problem is that the group manager has interest for that to happen.
I'm perfectly willing to let things ride with reusing that same KDC nonce value and see if people later down the road complain. I think it's likely to get a complaint.
Hmm.
We will rename it anyway. But are you saying so removing this like the mechanism in the OSCORE document or the ACE key group common score document to derive a different nonce? Like they will be aligned. Is that what you're saying?
Aligning them would be my preference.
Mine too.
Because it makes
Yes.
less code that I have to write. Not having a fresh challenge makes me think that that might be cause may have flags raised down the line.
If the client is honest, it will be fresh overall because of the client nonce.
Remember what I said earlier, clients are evil.
Yeah, right. So, so I wouldn't expect that. The group manager will not remember that. So we are back to square one.
When you, sorry, just a question. When you say you're going to name it, is it like you're going to call it something like a ticket that it gets from the group manager, or
Yes.
how is renaming solving the issue?
It doesn't solve the issue, but you wouldn't be using nonce.
If you call it challenge rather than nonce, it doesn't have the use only once nomenclature.
It's a share of a challenge. And just to clarify, so it is supposed to be reusable for any joining at any group under that same token.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Right.
the idea. Yes.
So as long as the same token is valid, the client should go for that same challenge share unless the token is posted again.
Oh, that sounds good. What's your next slide?
The next slide
we're
is
running out of time.
the next slide is just the wrap up.
Okay. So just because we're running out of time, so the next meeting will be on the, that's up at the top of the notes, on the 18th of May. I would like this to focus on the group OSCORE stuff. So I mean, if the MQTT people, if MQTT does have some specific issues we need to deal with, we'll deal with them, but let's focus on these two documents, the two group. Yes.
Agreed. I think with the input I've got from this meeting, I should be good to go with version 5, and there shouldn't be too many things to raise from MQTT side anyway.
Okay. Thank you everybody for coming and participating. We appreciate it, and we will see you in a month, except for the ones that we see tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, I lost my